Hi, my name is Cameron Miller, and this is Trinity Place, and this is a reflection on the 15th week after Pentecost. Jesus escapes. The story begins with an escape. Jesus runs away from his life, and he escapes. Remember that as we first savor that delicious poem from Patty Ann Rogers. I don't know what the greatest grandeur is. It certainly could be the reptilian dance of the purple-tongued sandguana, but I'm more inclined to end up where Patty Ann Rogers ends up, in wonderment, above that one fathomless moment we have yet to live. But the dark emptiness, she writes, contained in every next moment seems to me the most singularly glorious gift, that void which one is free to fill. Hot dog, that's the great, spectacular, spiritual place to arrive, the void which we are free to fill. I can't ever forget watching that moment when I was at my father's death. It was a moment of stunning sensation, of no more moments. At his side, holding his hand, watching the pulse tick in his neck, when suddenly it got markedly slower and smaller, and just then melted into stillness. He had no next moment. For all of us, there will be a moment with no next moment. And that intuitive knowledge makes each next moment the most glorious grandeur there is. Now, most of us, most of the time, simply stumble into the next moment, sleepy-eyed and half-conscious. We just slog through it because it's there. We miss the grandeur of it all. And then something happens, and we wake up. We wake up in the moment, and instead of something that we're plowing through, the moment opens up inside of us like a spectacular red tulip blooming in the morning warmth. The moment wakes us up, and we are alive. It is a stupendous grandeur, that next moment of ours. But now back to Jesus and his escape, which we will see has a double meaning. You may not have picked this up or remembered the context of the story, but Jesus has taken off again. He likes to do that, especially in Mark's gospel, and it makes his friends so angry. One of my children, I won't say which one in order to protect the guilty, used to love to run away in big stores and hide. He was 3 or 4 and very mobile. And the worst day was in a huge Burlington coat factory when he decided to escape and hide in a rack of thick winter coats. The joy of the very next moment was a source of terror in our next moment. Perhaps some of you remember that special kind of terror. Anyway, Jesus escapes. He takes off, leaving his friends and associates in the dust. He runs away to Tyre, which, by the way, was a prosperous Roman port city. I'm not saying it was Cancun or anything, but maybe it was in relationship to the pus and blood of filthy, needy people that was his usual scenery. Jesus escapes and he sneaks into a house because, as the text said, he did not want anyone to see him. So he's hiding out. He's reading a good book, eating pizza with his feet on the coffee table. Get the picture? Then some stranger bursts in. Stop and think about that. He's finally alone. And he's taken care of himself. And settling into the arms of that moment, like you fold into a hammock. And then this unknown woman walks in the door asking for help. Okay, you got the picture? But then there's this whole other layer of Jesus' consternation. He's suddenly alone in a house with an unknown and unrelated woman. Even today, even in our free and open society, a well-known public figure, a religious figure no less, cannot be found alone in a home with an unrelated person of the opposite sex. In Jesus' day, the taboo was more powerful and more dangerous, and you and I can't possibly understand it. It violated every untold number of religious purity laws that was a rigid caste system of a tightly stratified society. It was bad all the way around. Never mind that he wanted to escape and to escape people like her. No matter that he went there to be alone, to recover from people like her. Never mind that he went there to get away from people like her and people like you and me, needy people. And then on top of all that, she wasn't even Jewish. She wasn't even Judean. She was foreign. She was a Gentile. A Gentile like you and me. In other words, dirty Gentile. Actually, dirty Gentile is a redundancy. Gentiles are by nature dirty. A Gentile was the source of ritual impurity, and she was the source of moral impurity as well. Don't touch, don't speak, don't acknowledge anyone like her. That was the rule, that was the expectation. And Jesus, before this encounter, seems to be mired in that kind of thinking, that kind of rigid caste thinking. Now, if we imagine that Jesus was free of that sort of bigotry, as if he somehow lived in the 21st century North American norms and values, this story will correct that assumption. In this story, if we really listen to it, we can almost hear Jesus thinking, dirty, filthy, pig-eating Gentile, interrupting my quiet time, risking my reputation, begging for special treatment. So let's pause here and remember that the grandeur in each of our next moments is not that they promise to be filled with goodies, like some fat piñata, but that the next moment, the next one, is full and waiting to be opened. And what we find there may not be warm and fuzzy, but it likely can wake us up and even save us from ourselves. To get what's going on in this story, I ask you to put aside your disbelief in healing miracles if you're someone who simply can't imagine that kind of supernatural wonder. And when she asks Jesus to save her daughter, Jesus calls her daughter a dog, unworthy of scraps. Now, Christians usually come to this story with an overlay of bizarre dogma that Jesus was perfect. And they twist and contort the story with rationalizations and say he was testing her faith, or some equally unlikely proposition. But if we come to the story without doctrine, and we really listen to it, that's not what the story tells us. The story tells us that Jesus' knee-jerk reaction is his own bigotry. She's poked a hole in the wasp nest of nastiness that resides inside Jesus, just like the ones that reside inside you and me. Woe to those poor slobs who unknowingly poke a hole in the cyst of bigotries and prejudices that have attached themselves to one chamber of our heart or another. Whoever it is going to get it. So now listen to the story with that as background. There's nothing noble in this situation for the woman or for Jesus. Anyone who has known the danger of his or her child, knows the unnatural terror that grips you in that moment. You do not think or act according to any rules. You just do what you need to do to take care of your baby. Puff up or slink, beg or demand. You do what you need to do in that horror-filled moment when your child is endangered. So the Syrophoenician woman, who has no name, probably because the privileged man who wrote this story, goes into the house to ask a perfect stranger for help. Jesus is likely her last resort. It says she begs. She begs at his feet for him to help her daughter. Jesus, who's angry and resentful, tells her that she and her daughter do not deserve what he has to offer. It's the ultimate blaming the poor for being poor. The only thing that could be colder is the way he says it. It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Jesus is telling her that in the scheme of things, under the universe of God, it would be unfair for her daughter to get what he has because she's not one of the deserving children. He does not even make the scarcity excuse that there isn't enough to go around. Some people get some and some don't, the capitalist argument. Instead, he says it would defy the laws of nature for him to help her daughter. Some of the people I knew in El Salvador had a special kind of scorn they hurled toward some rich people when they said, "His dog is fat," by which they scowled, that he cared more about his dog than human beings who are hungry. Well, Jesus tells the woman her daughter is a dog. The woman is brilliant. In spite of whatever bitter rage and anger she may have felt, instead of spitting in his face, she says, "Yes, sir, but even the dogs get scraps." Now, we get to see what makes Jesus Jesus. Because whatever his weariness, whatever his prejudices, whatever his bigotries, whatever his dogmas and theologies, whatever his grief, whatever his sorrow, whatever his poverty, whatever his own shadow of dark demons, he opens himself to the grandeur in that moment that the woman has opened. Suddenly, he sees himself reflected in her eyes. Suddenly, he hears himself echoed in her voice. Suddenly, he knows that he has been deeply corrupted, and immediately, he turns around and changes directions. And that, by the way, is the original meaning of the word repent. Repent means revolution. It means to turn around and to change direction. Right there and right then, in that moment, on that spot, Jesus repents. A revolution takes place in Jesus, and he changes inside and out. And in fact, if we pay attention to this story, it says that he leaves Tyre and he goes to the Decapolis, which is a series of 10 Gentile cities. In opening to that moment with that Syrophoenician woman that he had never known before, he suddenly explodes into a whole new realm. He suddenly goes where no prophet has ever gone before. And we are where we are today as a result. Dirty, filthy, pig-eating Gentiles that we are, each with our own wasp nests of prejudices, forming a cyst of bigotries upon our hearts. Because of Jesus, we know there is an alternative. Because of Jesus, we know that we are not condemned by the demons that will always inhabit us. We can decide to do something different. We can decide to make a revolution and enter into the revolution that awaits us when we open that moment. Now, I happen to think that that is even greater and more amazing than the reptilian dance of the purple-tongued sand guana. And that's all I got. Peace be with you.